watch. Yes, that way you can watch the replay if you're not here live, or if you are here live and there's something that you think that you missed that you want to get back again, I will make sure to send that link out in a small little gift to you tomorrow morning. If you need or like to use closed captioning, depending on if you're in the app or in a browser in your operating system, there should be something either in your bottom menu or your top menu. It's going to say closed captions or captioning or subtitles. That's how you turn that on, and it should start to live transcribe what I'm saying for you. So if you do like to use closed captions, that's an option that you can turn on for yourself, depending on where you are. It's either up here or down here. Closed captioning, subtitles, that's what that's going to be called. Okay, let me start to share my screen and we will get to talking. Share. Okay, we good? Okay, so again, welcome to Master Free Motion Quilting. I'm going to talk about 3 things tonight that will set you up for free motion success before you even get to your sewing machine. Okay, so here's what we're going to talk about tonight. It's kind of my fun way of trying to like hop on some pop culture right now. I listen to a lot of music when I'm either writing or sewing or drafting patterns. And this is the playlist that was happening when I was writing this course. So it's a little bit of a fun way, but some of the things we're going to talk about tonight, we're going to talk about my journey into quilting, how I got stuck in a meander era for a decade, how I broke out of that. Then we'll move into the 3 things that you need to master free motion quilting. So we're going to talk about the tools that you need. We're going to talk the space that you need to work in. And we're definitely going to talk about self-confidence and saying with your whole chest that you are a free motion quilter. Just full disclosure, I am going to preview my brand new course that I'm launching tonight at the end of the session. So I will talk a little bit about that. And then at the end, we're going to do a Q&A session. Okay. So with that, it's me. I'm Joni. Like I said at the top, when you all came in, I am the chief thread lover in this joint. It is my mission to inspire you to create beautiful quilts in an uplifting community. The only thing that I love more than quilting, what I've been doing for more than 20 years, is sharing my love of the craft with you. So I love learning something and then bringing it to you in a way that can help you become a better quilter too. I live in Quilton, Lorton, Virginia. That's just outside of Washington, D.C. I live with my husband, Quilt Consort, and our cat, William. He is a former dumpster monkey who does not like me or care for me, never wants to cuddle. And so I'm 100% certain that at some point tonight, he's going to hop in my lap because he knows that I don't want anything to do with him. Okay, so when I'm not in the studio, we just bought a brand new house and we've got about 2/3 of an acre of yard to take care of. So I enjoy doing that. I love spending time with Quilt Consort, the guy sitting across the table from me tonight. And I like reading. I like playing Animal Crossing. I would absolutely die for Puddles and Sherb. If you know what any of that means, we should talk because we probably need to trade some items for some bells. All right, so I'm the problem. It's me. This is my very first quilt, and it's a little embarrassing to start off this way with so many of you, to be honest. I was pregnant with my daughter, who's now about to turn 27, and I decided that I wanted to be crafty. And I tried learning how to sew clothing, and I absolutely hated trying to set a sleeve. I didn't really like any of the patterns. My body was changing. So by the time I finished something, it didn't fit anymore. So just like that was not for me, but I still wanted to do something with fabric and with textiles. And so I went to Joann's and I got the ugliest blue and yellow calico that I could possibly find. My idea here was to do a straight like blue and yellow checkerboard, and I'll get into why it didn't end up that way later on. But I ugliest fabric. I think I had a cardboard cutting mat, even though the self-healing mats were definitely available back during this time. And I got all of these squares cut out, and I cut them out into like individual 2.5-inch squares because I didn't know anything about chain piecing, know anything about strip piecing. And then I ran out of knowing what to do. And if we can be honest, I'm pretty sure it looks like I never started with knowing what to do, but I definitely ran out of knowing what to do when I got all of these pieces cut out. And I packed it all up. I forgot all about it. And a few years later, I was at an event and a friend of mine was working on a hand applique block. And I'm like, wait, you're a quilter? And she says, yes. And I explained to her how I had these huge baggies full of ugly fabric cut up, and she agreed to come to the house that weekend. And she gets there and she kind of shakes her head. She kind of explains to me, value and breaking things up and having, patterns that aren't so clunky. And she helped me put this top together. And we went out and we went shopping. We got the pink that's the center squares and the borders. We got the green so that way we could kind of add some interest, if you will, to this very ugly quilt. And she helped me finish it. And I think the thing that blew me away when I was done, not that I finished a quilt, is that she said, if you want to make another one and have me walk you through all of it, I'm happy to help. I couldn't believe that she had the faith or the belief in me that maybe I could be good at this and was willing to spend more time with the disaster. That is me. So we shook it off and we went back to Joann's, and she got me a pattern book that had this particular pattern in it. And she taught me how to read the pattern. She explained to me the difference between color, value, and scale when it came to choosing fabrics. When we got home, she explained to me how to do strip piecing, chain piecing, so that I could get things done just a little bit faster. And then when I explained to her what I wanted to do with this border, she just got right down to it and did the quilt math. So that way we could figure out exactly what needed to happen. And she helped me. She helped me through this second quilt completely start to finish. And it's so much better. And seeing the difference in quality from quilt 1 to quilt 2 really gave me that boost that I needed to think, I could actually be good at this. And that was all it took to get me hooked. I'm sure, like most of you, your first or second quilt, you were all in, right? Okay, so now I'm hooked on this thing. Now I am trying to skim as much money off of the grocery budget as I can to go buy more fabric. Now I'm, commandeering a 3-foot computer desk, and I'm setting up shop in the corner of our living room. My daughter's very young at the time, and was very good about wanting to be close to me. So I could sew as much as I wanted, as long as I had a pile of toys in the middle of the room for her. But when it came to the actual quilting part, I learned the meander motif, so precisely one motif. And I stayed here, like I said earlier, for about a decade. And I would constantly sign up for free motion quilting classes, particularly if they were free, because my budget wasn't all that great. And I would go through and I would master the meander in the class, and then I would nope out of the rest. And for whatever reason, I either wasn't courageous enough or I wasn't persistent enough, but I would never really get over that meander hump. So I stayed here for quite a long time, and it's a little embarrassing. So here we are. I have, now I've moved to Panama City, Florida from California, where I met my friend Susan, who walked me through those first 2 steps, or those first 2 quilts. And, this kit on the left, I got this as a kit because I still wasn't very confident in picking my own fabric. Plus there was absolutely no way that I was going to cut all this curved piecing. So really proud that one of my earlier quilts did have curved piecing. But as you can tell in the detail photo, meander all the way. Same store, just a year later, they had a mystery quilt. And if you're unfamiliar with mystery quilts, you get basically the fabric requirements. So you need a yard of dark, 2 yards of medium, 1 yard of light, and a 1/4 yard of an accent, right? And that's all you get. And the way that this mystery quilt was set up is that if you went into the shop to sew clue 1 in their classroom, clue 2 was free. And free was a very valuable word to me still at this point in my quilting journey. Okay, so starting to move along, starting to get more confident in designing my own quilts. A is for Aiden. Ended up being a large baby small throw for a very dear friend of mine and her new son. Starting to get more confident using more colors, more patterns in a quilt. But as you can see in both of these, I'm still meandering. So I want to talk a little bit though about the size of these two, because like I said, A is for Aiden. It's a very large baby, small throw size. The summer sampler on the right, that one was about 60 by 70. And those were done on my domestic sewing machine. And so I really like to talk when folks are like, oh, well, I only have a domestic sewing machine and my quilt's really big. There's no way. I want to talk about, don't think about the 80 by 80 that the quilt is. Think about that about 4 by 4 that's right there in your hands of where you're actually sewing. Because once you sew that 4 by 4, you're going to stop, you're going to reposition your hands, and you're going to go to next 4 by 4, right? So yeah, you might still have a bunch of stuff like crammed up in your throat and all of that, and kind of have to like, put something over your shoulder so you can get to that 4 by 4. But the best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. And that's really the way that you should approach free motion quilting on your domestic machine too, is not 80 by 80, but that 4 by 4 that sits right there in your hands. Okay, so, moving right along, I am killing it at selecting colors. I am amazing at selecting fabrics. I am about the most precise piecer you will ever meet in your life. I'm starting to try English paper piecing, and these quilts had so much potential for how they could be quilted. And because I was stuck in my meander era and I wasn't brave enough to break out of that and try something new, I have 2 more quilts that have the meander quilting motif in them. And it really makes me sad, especially for Hex EMF. I was really like this close to my free motion quilting learning journey that if I could have waited just a little bit longer to quilt this one, the possibilities were just endless with it. Okay. This is starting to get a little bit ridiculous, right? So I'm putting together these quilts. I'm an amazing piecer. I have good precision, and here I am meandering. And at this point, I'm really not enjoying the quilting process. Quilting is my least favorite part of the process. I am literally only quilting these because I cannot or will not send them out to be quilted because of cost, and so that I can, get this beautifully pieced top with all of the amazingly selected fabrics and get those quilted so that I can be cuddling underneath them as soon as possible. So it's starting to get a little ridiculous. I'm not enjoying any part of the process at this point. And even though I'm sharing what I'm doing on my blog and on Instagram, I really feel like it's the same quilt over and over again. It just has different fabric, right? And so I'm really starting to feel like maybe this just isn't for me. And this was kind of the breaking point for me. This is a basket that we keep in our living room. And whenever we have friends come over, I will just put this basket in the middle of the living room and not really say anything. And by the end of the night, the basket is empty and everybody has a quilt either on their lap or around their body. And I'm looking around and I'm literally giving warmth to my friends, but I felt like there was absolutely no depth at all in my quilting practice. I felt like I was the Oprah of meander. You get a meander, you get a meander, you get a meander. It was just really ridiculous. And I think that like looking at this basket was really like the last straw for me. And that's what made me say, enough, it's time to look what you made me do, right? So it's time to break out of jail. It's time to start my learning journey. And I started that by learning as many motifs as I could. I made sure that I had practice sandwiches all the time, and I was learning about tension. I was learning about quilting plans. I was learning about speed, how fast my fabric should be going compared to how fast my needle was going, right? And it's in this learning process that I'm really starting to enjoy all of it again. Not only am I like building my confidence as a quilter in my free motion practice, but the cutting, the piecing, the basing, everything is starting to become more enjoyable. I'm starting to make a ton of mini quilts just so that I can get a project done faster so that I can free motion quilt it. I'm absolutely loving all of the process right now. Okay, so now here's a little bit of a trunk show when it comes to how I broke out of meander and what that looked like for me. So in this particular mini quilt, there are 3 different motifs. I use switchbacks in the yellow and green square in the center. I use continuous curves in those triangles. And then I background quilted the paisleys in the background. So it's really nice to see like the depth of motion and using the different motifs, having a couple of the triangles unquilted so that way they could pop just a little bit. I really enjoyed putting this one together. Okay, scallops are really, really fun and really, really bouncy. So if you ever need to like just totally unplug your mind, put on a good playlist, get your needle going, and you are literally just bouncing back and forth to the music. And by the time that you get to the top, you can't even believe that you're done already. I really like the scallops here because I felt like the curve of the quilting motif broke up the geometry of these half square triangles. So one of the things I like doing is that if I have some curved piecing, or if I have a lot of floral, like big, bold hero image floral fabrics in my quilting, that's when I like to use more geometric quilting, and I might stick more to walking foot or straight line quilting. But when I've got something this geometric, I like to put as much curve as I can into my free motion quilting. Something that I realized that when I finished this quilt, it took me just as long to do the scallops as it would have to do a meander. And so that kind of was a switch flip for me at the time, is that I was doing the meander to get done with quilting as fast as possible because I didn't enjoy the quilting stage of the process at all. And so why was I doing something that I didn't enjoy in the name of saving time when I have never really been a deadline sewer to begin with? So this is the quilt that I try to think of when I'm working on a project and I'm like, oh, I just want it done, I should meander it. That's not really a time saver though, for me, is what I've learned. So this is the quilt, like whenever I'm ready to go back into meander jail, this is the quilt that I kind of stop, take my deep breath, and I remind myself that I can do this. Okay, this is where it starts to get really juicy. I learned how to McTavish, which is kind of like a little bit of a swirl mixed in with some paisleys. It had so much texture and depth to your entire quilt. For this particular pattern, I did an all over McTavish, and I think I used an entire large spool of thread. It's a very thready pattern. But this was where I was doing this, and I was like running my fingers down the sewing lines just so I could like feel that as my finger would go down, and just, it was so luxurious to me. And that's when I'm like, this is it. This is getting good. And this is when it starts to be like, quilting is my favorite part of the process. So what had been my least favorite part that I needed to get over with as soon as possible so that I could move on to the other parts is now becoming my most favorite part. Okay, we're going to talk about some oops, right? Because I realized literally right after I basted this that one of my blocks was turned wrong. And there's no amount of perfectionism in the world that was going to make me unbaste, unpick, resew, rebaste this quilt. So I absolutely love this for me, that I'm here talking to you about free motion quilting and how much I love it and how much I can help you become a better free motion quilter. And then I have this oops right there in the center medallion. So I'm just keeping it real. I'm trying to keep it humble. But this was the first big quilt that I quilted right after I learned a ton of motifs. This one's 80 by 80, but again, I was doing this 4 by 4 at a time, right? Just a little bit. I was really happy with the way the feathers came out. Not gonna lie, feathers still challenge me. I always have to practice them before I can put them into a quilt. But I love how doing, wider and narrower feathers kind of filled in that border. In that yellow and green border there in the center, I did continuous curves, and I'm really super proud that I was able to set that up in a way that I never had to break thread until I ran out of bobbin. And then for the background, I did go with a loopy meander. To me, since this was the first big quilt that I did, since learning all of these motifs, I was really excited to put 2 new motifs in here with the continuous curves, with the feathers. But I also wanted to kind of give a little bit of a nod in this quilt to where I came from. So this is me, the beginning of really busting out of that meander era and honoring that I stayed there, but then really celebrating the quilter that I'm about to become. Okay, this quilt, I call this the Little Llama's Long Con. My daughter was out visiting, and she conned me into making this quilt every single step of the way. We were at our local quilt store, and she saw the kit with the pattern and the fabric and all of that. But she was also a college student and was not able to afford it. And I'm like, you know what? We don't see each other very often. The fact that you're even interested in trying to make a quilt, like I'm here for this. I'll just go ahead and get it for you because, there's not a whole lot that we're going to be doing and spending money on while you're here. So good. And we're on the way home, and she tells me that she wants to put the top together, but would I quilt it for her because she knew that I was on this quilting journey. And I said, sure. And so she's reading the pattern as we're on our way home, and she goes, oh, well, the cutting is really complicated, and there's like a lot to organize. Maybe you and I should cut this out together before I go back to California. And I'm here to tell you that I made every single bit of this quilt. This child, she helped me keep pieces organized. I will give her credit for that. She did help me keep pieces organized when when we were cutting everything out, and she had a great system for baggies and the little blocks, but that kid conned me into making this entire quilt for her. So she goes back home to California. I'm working on this quilt, and I send her a message, I don't know, maybe about a month before I'm supposed to go see her for Thanksgiving. And I said, if you're up for like semi-custom quilting, there's a better than even chance that I will have this quilt done and ready to bring to you at my Thanksgiving visit. If you want custom quilting, let's just go ahead and count on it now being your funeral shroud, because that's probably how long it will take me to make it. And she decided to go with semi-custom quilting, as you can kind of see here in some of the details. And I did swirls in the teacups, and I did paisleys in the teapots. On the hat bands around the border, I did switchbacks, and in the bunny and dormouse at the top and bottom, I did some graffiti and echo quilting, and we were both really, really happy with how this turned out. So again, this one was a beast, 76 by 81. How do you eat an elephant? 4 by 4 inches at a time, 1 bite at a time, right? So that is my quilting journey. That is how I got to where I am absolutely in love and enamored with free motion quilting. This is how I busted out of my meander era. And I'm here to tell you that if you are in your meander era, or if you are just beginning your quilting journey, I would love to teach you how to meander, but I also want to move on as quickly as we can to something else. So that way you don't stay where I stayed for as long as I stayed. Okay, so with that, now we're going to talk about the 3 things that I promised you. All right, first up, everything has changed. Modern tools have revolutionized the way that we quilt. So just want to talk a little bit about the bare minimum tools that you need to be successful at free motion quilting. Obviously, you need a sewing machine. This is Bernice. She is the star of the show. She is a workhorse. Over the pandemic, I learned how to service her myself, and she still purrs like a kitten despite the hours and hours of work that we do together every single week. So to do free motion quilting on your sewing machine, your machine needs to do 2 things. You need to be able to lower or cover your feed dogs, and you need a free motion quilting foot. Sometimes it's called a hopping foot. Sometimes it is called a darning foot. But essentially what it is a foot that has a spring on it. And that's all you need. So that way it will hop up and down on your quilt. So that way you can move your hands and get the lines to go in the direction that you want them to. Okay, so let's talk supplies, right? And I want to start by saying quilting is a $4 billion industry in the United States alone. You do not need to be spending all of that money, right? So I want to talk about the absolute basic supplies that you'll need, that they don't need to cost a lot of money. And these will get you in the door and started towards free motion success. So needles and good thread. I am a huge fan of Aurifil 50 weight for quilting. It's sturdy enough that it's going to hold up. I've yet to have a problem, even with kid quilts, deteriorating, the thread not standing up to it, but it's also not so thick that it's really hard to deal with. Good needles. I know, if you're new to it, maybe you're going to try out some different needles. There are, I think, 3 different options for free motion quilting, and you should definitely like figure all that out and what works for you. I like to buy mine in bulk. And so this is a box of 100 sewing machine needles. And I am ridiculous about how often I will change my needles on a sewing day. If I sit down on a Saturday morning and go all day long, I'm probably going through about 4 or 5 needles. That's most of your problems can be solved with your computer. Try restarting it with your sewing machine, put in a new needle. Quilting gloves. Absolutely love quilting gloves that have the grippiness. One of the great things about them is that they do all of the physical and manual labor for you. So if you don't have these gloves, you're really starting to grip, right? And you're kind of getting like claw hands, and they're starting to ache, like my hands hurt already, right? And then you're also probably bringing your shoulders up to your ears, and they're telling your ears a secret. So you want to make sure that you bring that down, and these quilting gloves do a really good job with that. Also, the first thing I do when I take my gloves out of the box is I cut off the tip of the thumb and the index finger on both hands. And that allows me to still thread my needle, bury a thread, all of that without having to constantly take my gloves on and off. So a couple weeks ago, I was in a sewing retreat and we were talking about our favorite marking tools. And, a lot of people talked about chalk pencils. They talked about the chalk roller markers. They talked about the water soluble blue markers. They talked about the friction pens. Nobody talked about this gem, which is the Hera marker. And this has a very like a blade kind of top to it that you can just kind of rub across your fabric and it'll create an indentation. And one of the things I love about using a Hera marker to mark my quilting is that at the end, I don't have to remove any of my marks. And for the life of the quilt, I don't have to worry about any of the marks coming back. And then, obviously the rotary cutter, I think that that's the biggest revolution in modern quilting. And I use that to square my quilt up at the end rather than trying to cut it with shears. So that way I know I've got a good straight line. So I want to ask a question and have you go into the chat, and then we'll come and look at some of your answers here in a little bit. But for the folks that are chasing gadgets, or you bought a tool because you thought that it was really going to up your quilting game, I want to hear in the chat, if you will, what tool, what kind of gimmicky gadget do you regret purchasing? So drop those in the chat. And I want to use that kind of as an example that you don't have to have the latest gimmick or gadget. You don't have to spend a ton of money. These needles right here, the little 5-pack, they're 76 cents a piece. If you divide the price of the needle pack out into 5, 76 cents a piece. If you do get the bigger box, they're even cheaper because you're buying in bulk. Hera marker, $7. The only reason I have 2 is because I lost one at one point and then I found it. So I'm grateful that I have 2. The gloves, they're about $8, but I say all this to say the basics are enough. Like I said earlier, $4 billion in revenue in the quilting industry in the United States, and you don't need to do more than your fair share. Okay. All right. So let me pop out of this real quick and come over to chat, and let's see what you regret buying. Fancy machine quilting rulers. I have quilting rulers, and yeah, I'm not a fan. To me, they lose a lot of their grip, after a couple of uses, and I never know where to place them. But yeah, the machine quilting rulers, definitely. Magnetic seam guide, really? Okay. I know some people are like, die for those, but if you have a really good 1/4-inch foot, that's all you need. Seam fix. Okay. Stitch regulator. Interesting, Carol. Okay. So I will say, I say interesting, but since I sew on a Bernina, I have the Bernina stitch regulator. That's that bouncing foot that I was talking about earlier. It did come with my machine, and I'll be honest, as soon as I plug it in, the first thing I do is turn off the BSR function, and I use the speed of the needle and my speed of the fabric as a way to regulate my stitches. Olson, you pinned your first quilt, never again. Do you mean like pin basting? So that way you had to like stop every so often and pull a pin out, like, cause I agree with you that that's the worst. Once I learned about spray basting, I will never go back. Multiple rulers. Okay. I don't know if I can, this is me spending more than my fair share, friends. I have 1, 2, 3. I have 5 rulers that I keep on my cutting table, and I do use them all pretty regularly. So I'm not going to sweat about that. But yeah, especially if they do the same thing, it is weird to have a lot of rulers. I don't know what it is about me, but specialty rulers, like, how to trim a pineapple block and all of that. I'm a sucker for those, and I never use them. And Hubs is nodding his head because he's tripped over them before. Quilting gloves, really? Oh, gardening gloves with the grippers from the dollar store work just as good. That's a great tip, Alec. Thank you. Okay. All right, let me go back into sharing our presentation. Okay, so we have talked about the tool section, right? Let's talk about your blank space, and we're going to write your name. So this is the physical space of what it is that you need to have a successful free motion quilting experience. And I would like to be the first to say, I understand that the fact that I have dedicated space in my house for quilting puts me in a very privileged group, right? But I have worked on as small as a 3-foot wide computer desk. And not only was it like 3 foot wide, but if I went faster than half speed, the table would start to shake. And it had that little like half shelf in the back for your monitor and all that. So like I couldn't even use the entire depth of the 3-foot table. I've been at a dining room table. This table right here, I built it about 12 years ago. And the legs are about 6 inches shorter than your standard table, because once you put your sewing machine on top of it, you don't want to make that sewing surface too tall, right? So I want to talk a little bit about dining room tables, because I know that that's a pretty common location for people to be sewing and quilting. So let's talk about what it's going to take to make that dining room table setup work for you and your body. And let me do some tea so I don't start coughing. Beautiful. Okay. So dining room table is set up to be a comfortable height for bringing food from a plate to your mouth, right? And we want that distance to be short, particularly if you're me and you don't want dinner all over here, right? So the second that you put your sewing machine on top of your dining room table and you are sitting in a dining room chair, now everything is too tall. And remember how I talked earlier about now your shoulders are starting to hunch up. They're starting to tell your ears a secret. You're starting to get claw hands because you don't know really what else to do. You're T-Rexing a little bit, right? Because everything's up here. So if you are at a dining room table, and for whatever reason, your spouse is completely unreasonable and won't let you cut 6 inches off of the legs of your table, what you want to do, if you have an adjustable chair, crank that all the way up, right? Get it to where you're at the highest level. So that way, when you do put your hands on your sewing machine, your shoulders are down and back and you've got really great posture. If you don't have an adjustable chair, all of those pillows on the couch that your husband can't stand and said are good for nothing, guess what? They're good for something. We're going to grab a pile of those and you're just going to stack and sit, right? Stack and sit. And then once you have enough up there that you've got that right height, take a look, see what you've got. So that way, you know exactly what you have to pull off of the couch next time you come to sew. So we brought our body up. So that way the top of our body, we're down and back, we're relaxed, we're not clawing or T-Rexing our hands, we're good to go. But your legs are probably like swinging in the wind, right? And you're gonna have to reach down if you're gonna try to get your foot pedal. And the whole point of bringing us up is so that we don't have to contort our bodies into horrible positions when we're quilting. So grab a couple of books, grab a small step stool, put that underneath your foot pedal so that way you're right there. That way you're not stretching for anything. So let's see if we can solve some challenges tonight. If you can, in the chat, I would like to know the most challenging part of your setup. The most challenging part of your setup. So if you're having a problem with a table too high, a table too low, if you don't have a great chair, like let's talk about if there's one thing you could fix about what you're sewing in, like let's drop that in the chat and talk about that. So while you guys are answering that question, I'm going to tell you that when your sewing space is set up, all of your major joints are 90 degrees, right? Your knees are 90 degrees, your hips are 90 degrees. You're sitting back on your sit bones. So, you know, when you have a young child who will like sit on your lap and you're like, oh my God, they have such a bony butt. Well, that's because they don't have the donk that we do yet. And so you can feel those little like pelvic bones, they're called sit bones, and they're digging into you. So rather than being back on your tailbone, make sure you're up on your sit bones and you've got 90-degree angles pretty much everywhere. And once you put your hands on your machine, you're as close to 90 as you can get. That's when you know you have a really good setup. If you do have to twist or move around to either get supplies or wrangle quilt into the throat space of your sewing machine, make sure you're not just twisting at the waist, right? Like this, that's painful for me to do right now. I'm leaving my legs still, but I'm just moving my upper body. That's really painful, and that's going to like cause you some problems later on. So if you have that swivel chair, make sure you're using the whole swivel of the chair and you're taking your whole body to where you need to go to get what it is that you're trying to get. And then number one tip for your sewing space is make sure you're taking breaks. And I know if you're like me, you can get in the zone and not realize that so much time has passed and you're wondering why you're dehydrated, why your hips hurt, why your shoulders hurt, why your back hurts, why you're clawing your hands. And it's because you're not taking a break to rest your eyes, right? Because we are looking at some very fine details as we're sewing. You want to make sure that you're drinking water. You want to make sure that you're stretching. And so I like my little cube timer, and that's what I have here. And every single side, it's 15, 20, 30, and 60, right? And you set it by just tipping that 30 up to the top, and now it starts a timer for 30 minutes. So if you lose track of time, like I do, I think this was $6 on Amazon. Get you a little cube timer, set a timer on your phone, make sure you're taking breaks. Okay, let's see if we can solve some problems. Let's kind of look in the chat. Okay. Okay, here we are. Confined space. So are we talking like you only have that 3-foot computer table and you're trying to find it hard to get where you're going? One of the things that I did when I was on the computer table is I went and grabbed a couple of chairs from the dining room table and I put them like if you were to sit down in them, you would be facing away from me. So that way I had the chair backs and I could rest the quilt on there. So you don't want your quilt hanging down over the table, right? But if you do need to get that extra space, definitely recommend putting some chairs right there. So that way you've got something that you can lean on if you are in a confined space. Deb's pedal, her foot pedal slides all over the place. Go to Home Depot and they make this grippy stuff. It's like it feels foamy, but it's also like a little woven. You can get it in the kitchen section, like for lining cabinet shelves or your silverware drawer or anything like that. Go and get a roll of that. It's super affordable. You know, I think the biggest roll is like $9, $10, something like that. And then cut a square that is just bigger than your foot pedal. Put that underneath there on your floor, and it's going to grip between the floor and your pedal, and that way it doesn't slide over the place. Table is a bit high and not enough room to the left of the machine. So something you'll notice here, my sewing machine is as far to the right as it can possibly be. So that way I do have all that space to the left of the machine to rest my quilt and all of that. So if there's a way to like slide just a little bit more, definitely recommend that. Good chair that will support your lower back. Absolutely. Like, can I just say, I described my age as almost 50 the other day, and I kind of wanted to like die about it. And I think the worst part about all of that is back pain. I think if there is anything like genie in a bottle, back pain is what I'm trying to fix. Yeah, I mean, I wish I could say that there was an easier, affordable solution, but money spent on a good chair is definitely worth it. Having enough space on the table. Yep, Cindy, I hear that. Quilting with limited space on the machine base. Okay, so if I'm reading this right, Patty, like what comes with your machine is pretty limited, and then it kind of like drops off onto your table, right? So definitely there are extenders for that, right? My machine came with one out of the box. I did end up ordering, let's see if I can show you. So I do have a plexiglass that does extend that by quite a bit. So that way that drop off isn't as sudden and isn't as drastic. That's a way to go. And then, you know, once you get to where you're in the market for like more of like the fancier like sewing furniture, that's when they're going to start to sit that machine flush into your desk. And I have never been able to do that kind of a setup for myself, but I have a feeling that is going to be a game changer when it's time for me to start looking at that. Deb says organizing all of her stuff if it's spread all over. If you're talking tools and whatnot, I love my little 3-tier IKEA storage bin. It's on roller wheels, so I can bring it close to me or I can push it away depending on what my needs are. And the top shelf is like all of the stuff that I use every single sewing session. Uncomfortable chair, always end up with a sore back. So if it's your lower back, go, something that's really good at relieving lower back pain is go lay on the floor up against a wall and put your bum as close as you can to the wall, and then put those legs straight up and just lay there for about 5, 10, 15 minutes, depending on how bad the pain is. And I don't know why it works. It just does. It's magic. And it's the best feeling when you're done. Too much stuff in your workspace, can't get the quilt on the table. Yeah. So before I had this, stuff was everywhere and I would have to get up for random reasons that made no sense. Limited space in the base of the machine, knee control, and closing it in a pool needle. Oh, okay. So you have a knee lifter. So some machines will come with a knee lifter that once you plug in, that you can, you know, if this is your leg and this is the bar, you can just kind of like bump that bar with your knee and that will bring your presser foot up. But I like the idea of putting a pool needle on it so that you can have it kind of come to you a little bit better. Dining table off of Marketplace and had your son-in-law cut the legs off with a chainsaw. I would have loved to be there for that. That's amazing. I love that for you, Linda. Marilyn, pool needle. Yep. Marilyn, it's so good to see you. I'm sorry I missed you last week. Back brace helps for a good back. Thank you, Debbie. A gaming chair. Yes. So, I don't like that they have the armrest. So the chair that I'm in, this is my sewing chair, and it doesn't have armrest because I don't know. I just feel claustrophobic when I'm sewing, but my desk chair, my office chair has the arms. And I've definitely been thinking about like switching that to, a gaming chair as well. To increase it. Okay. Lorene has a tip to increase the area on your table. Set up the ironing board next to it and adjust the board to the same height. You know, I used to do that, but I would like have it for pressing when I was sewing because I am that lazy that I could just like cut everything off of my machine and do like this and press, and then come right back and not have to get up. But I absolutely love the thought of putting it over here on your left side and extending your work surface. That is great. Rosa, no worries. I will send out a replay link tomorrow so you can go back and rewatch anything that you've missed. And George uses an extra folding table to put his quilt on. Genius. I like it. Okay. Good deal. Okay. See, we're already starting to solve some problems. I love this for us. Okay. Let me come back here to our presentation. Friends, we need to calm down. Okay. So this is probably the most important thing that you need to master free motion quilting before you even get to your machine. I want you to look at this little girl on the left, and I want you to think about when you were her. And remember when a grown-up would come to you, sometimes condescending, sometimes in genuine interest, and say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you answered with your whole chest, a ballerina, an astronaut, and president of the United States. Because of course, you were awesome. You were a badass. You were going to do all of those things. Why should you pick one and settle, right? Because at that age, we really do believe in ourselves. And then something happens, whether it's family, the patriarchy, life, partners, friends, pressure that comes down on us. And somewhere, someone took that away from us. And rather than us saying, you're right, I should just be the chief of marketing for a health program, right? Instead of just, applying that to what you want to be when you grow up, we as women started to apply that to all of us, to our entire self. And as our confidence got quieter, those insecurities get louder and louder and louder, to the point where we don't think that we can do it. We don't think that we are good enough, that we have a good enough machine. We don't have the right table to sew on. We don't know all of the motifs, right? We have all of these reasons that have nothing to do with technical skills as to why we can't do this. So something I'd like you to do, I want you to look at this little girl. I want you to think about when you were her. And please say it out loud wherever you are, what kind of quilter you want to be. Do you want to be the best free motion quilter in the world? Because I'm here for this, sister, and I would love to be a part of your learning journey, right? Do you want to master enough motifs that you are doing more than just an all over? Say that out loud to yourself. I want you to hear it in your own voice, the kind of quilter that you are going to be. If you're comfortable sharing, please put in the chat what your affirmation is. So whatever you said, I want to be blank, whatever that blank is, go ahead and drop that in the chat and let us affirm you and let us build each other up. So I talked a little bit about people who say why they can't free motion quilt, right? The quilt's too big, my machine's too small. That's just math. That's just math, right? Because you're only quilting 4x4. When you've got your gloves on and you're doing the thing, you're only quilting 4x4. Okay, so that's not a technical problem. That's a you problem, and we can solve that together, right? You don't know enough motifs. Between me, between YouTube, between the entire quilting industry, somebody is here to teach you some motifs, right? So that's just a matter of math as well. That is not a technical skill. That is not a lack for anything on your part, except for believing that you can. I don't know what motif to use where. Okay, fair. That could be a technical problem. But then once I tell you, this is motif A and it rocks a border, that problem is solved, right? So all of these comes down to not being technical problems, but things that we say to ourselves to keep us from success. And one of the things that I really want to challenge you to do is to stop saying these things that will keep you from success and start saying your affirmation out loud. I'm going to be the best free motion quilter in the world. I am so sorry. Somebody has decided he's going to claw at my chair right now. I knew he would do this. I'm going to be the best free motion quilting in the world, or I'm going to use 5 motifs every single time. Whatever your affirmation is, let's talk about that. Okay. Let me get to where we were. Becky, I want to be brave, courageous, and creative. Becky, I want you to be brave, courageous, and creative. I want that for you so bad because I know you can do it. Somebody is just, I wish I could say your name. Somebody who has just logged in his iPhone wants to be a great free motion quilter. You know what? If you want it, you got it. That's easy. We're going to make that happen for you. Mary Lou would like to master many different techniques. I think that the more motifs that you have in your toolbox, the more successful you're going to be, because it's going to be a matter of not, these are the 3 things I know, and I am going to use only these 3 things, but here are the 30 things that I know, and I can pick any 5, any of them. Doesn't matter. Throw a dart, right? So definitely a toolbox. So Mary Lou, I want you to master as many different techniques as you can as well. Okay, DeCastle Law. I want to be a great free motion quilter. I want that for you too. I affirm you. Jennifer, I want to be a confident and self-assured quilter. Jennifer, I believe that that is possible for you. If that's what you want, and if that's what you're saying out loud in your room, and if that's what you're brave enough to put in the chat, then that's what you deserve. And we're going to get you there. Cindy, I want to be able to choose free motion style based on the quilt blocks. Yes, like so many of them are good for so many different reasons, and knowing which ones to pick where and having a great quilting plan before you even sit down, huge, huge element of success. I want that for you, Cindy. I've had 3. Leanne wants to be a more accurate piecer. Preach. Preach. Like there's nothing worse than getting done with a block that's supposed to be 12.5 inches and it's either 12 3/4 or 12. Yeah, nothing worse. Tracy, I want to be an amazing and confident free motion quilter. Tracy, I want that for you too. Margaret just wants to master an all over motif. Margaret, there's no just about it. And if that's what your goal is, then that's what we can do together. Absolutely, for sure. Deb wants to be able to decide what to quilt where on the quilt so that it looks professional. Again, that's a matter of knowing your motifs, knowing what they're there for, and then marrying them up, right? Marilyn wants to be a better art quilter, more quilting motifs, not large quilts, but smaller art quilts to have the machine quilting show off the designs. I really like that mindset, Marilyn. I love that you're thinking about how can the quilting be a part of the art and not just a thing that holds the art together. Easy, yes. Terry, courage to use free motion quilting on your quilt. Yeah, really, that's all it is sitting down. Like, not gonna lie, when I started my journey, y'all should know I'm pretty sweary in real life. So when I sit down to do a quilt, I will sit there, I will put my gloves on, I will look at it and I'll say, how can I F this up? And I feel like just saying that out loud and giving myself permission to like make the mistakes kind of like takes all of that pressure off of me and makes it so that I know I'm not going to, that I'm just fine. Marianne, how to combine your talent in art with quilting. Oh, so you have a different art of medium that you would like to kind of combine into quilting. I would love to see that happen for you. Debbie wants to make her stitching consistent. Practice makes progress. The more that you sit down to quilt, the more consistent your stitching is going to be. Barbara wants to be able to pick the right motifs for the quilt. Again, motifs, what they're good for, what your quilt looks like, right? Absolutely. Thank you to everyone who shared for that. I know sometimes like saying out loud what we want to be, especially if it's audacious, if you will, can be a little scary. So I'm grateful that you all were able to come into the chat and share that with us. So thank you very much. Okay, let's go back to the presentation. Let's go back to the tea. Okay, all right, too soon. So those are the three things. You need the tools, you need a place to use them, and you need the confidence to sit down at that table and approach your sewing machine with a can-do attitude. Those are the three things. If you have those three things in your house and in your heart, you will be a successful free motion quilter. Everything else is just practice and math. I promise you, practice and math. So we're about to go into Q&A. And before we do, I told you I have a brand new course that I want to introduce you to, and you belong with me in From Whole Cloth, where beautiful quilts, top to finish, all by you are made. I've been working very hard over the past couple of months to come up with my favorite 30 motifs that I've broken down into 6 different modules into a 3-month class. We have plenty of practice weeks together built in, so that way we can stay on track, stay on schedule together. By graduation, you will have the confidence to complete your own quilts, and we are going to work on 2 quilts together. So by this point, Quilt Consort, my lovely hubster across the table from me, should have put the link for the class in there. So if it's something you're interested in, go ahead and click on that link. Here's what's included: 30 motifs, 5 at a time, practice weeks built in, right? Every week we come together for a Q&A session so that you can get support from me and support from your fellow quilters. 2 mornings during the course, over the 3 months, I'm going to open a Zoom room from 9 a.m. to noon on Saturday mornings, and we're just going to sit and sew. We can work on homework together. We can practice our motifs and our practice sandwiches. We can work on other projects that we have going on. Whatever you want to do in those 3 hours, we're going to do 2 of those sessions. I wrote a 40-page course workbook that includes doodle sheets that is included in the course. It's a digital download, but it is also included in the course supply kit. So Quilt Consort is going to drop a link there. So if you are interested in the add-on supply kit, that is everything you need to start practicing on day 1. And then it's packed with exclusive bonuses like quilting plans, tension. I am writing a guide to quilt backings because a lot of times a pattern will say you need 8 yards or you need 4 yards, but it doesn't tell you how to cut, piece, and arrange that backing. So backing guide. A project tracking sheet, because if you get into this and you start loving quilting as much as I did, you're going to start having those whips pile up and you're going to need a way to keep track of them. Plus, I'm offering 3 free quilt patterns, one for taking to use the motifs and putting them into a homework project, and then 2 different options for a final project that work on together. At the end, we're going to have a live graduation where you can invite friends and family to watch and they can celebrate you and everything that you've learned over the 3 months. You're going to get a special graduation pin. Okay, so that's the class. That's what's involved. Normally, I'm going to price this when I run it the next time at $397, but I need your help for this first cohort because I'm not exactly sure everything is exactly as it should be for the best possible experience. So for $197, a $200 savings, you can be a part of the founding cohort and come along on this journey with me, with each other, making this course the best it can be for you and for future students. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say about From Whole Cloth. Quilt Consort is going to make sure that the link is good and available to you. If that's something you're interested in, great, go ahead and click that. But are you ready for it? Let's do some Q&A. All right, so we are going to stop sharing. I'm going to come over here. And I want to see your questions. We can talk about whatever you want. And while you're putting those questions in, I'm going to tee up and do another cough drop. Will it be videotaped for review if you can't attend? So the actual, yes. In all sorts of way. So all of the different module lessons, I am recording and editing those and uploading those as videos on demand. You can access those once the module releases at your own leisure. Our live Q&A sessions every Thursday night, I'm going to record those and upload those into the course as well. So you will not miss a thing if you can't be at any of the live events. Okay. What's the beginning date? Sure. So registration goes from now until September 1st. And then we will have an orientation week, the week of September 11th. That way you've got plenty of time to get your supplies in and get going with everything you need. And then that first module drops live on September 18th, and we graduate at the end of November. Mention custom and semi-custom quilting. What's the difference? Okay, so let's start with custom quilting and go from the most specific to the most general, right? So custom quilting is you are taking each shape individually and putting a quilting motif or a quilting design in that shape for that shape. You may not use that motif or that design anywhere else in the quilt ever again. It might just be for that shape. Or you might have 5 kinds of one shape that only get one motif, and then everything is getting its own. Every single space is quilted according to what is in that space. That's custom. On the far end of that is all over, right? That's my meander era. That's where you're taking one motif and you're putting it over the entire quilt. It's called all over quilting, background quilting, whatever you want to call it. Right there in the middle, that sweet spot, that's where you're using about 3 to 5 motifs, depending on what's happening in the quilt. So if you have sashing, maybe you're doing switchbacks in the sashing. If you have sashing squares, maybe you're doing continuous curves in those. Maybe you're doing feathers in the border, and maybe you're doing paisleys in every other square, and you're doing ginkgo leaves in the other. So you're using about 3 to 5 motifs, generally speaking, in the same way across the entire quilt. That's semi-quilting or semi-custom quilting. What is it? Okay, so Elaine, it's McTavish. And it is named after, I believe her first name is Susan McTavish, and it is her motif that she designed, and it is called McTavishing. And it is kind of a cross between a swirl, because you're doing some waves, and once you have a couple of waves start to branch out, you're kind of doing a little bit of a paisley in between them. So that's what McTavishing is. And once we get to the end, I can go back to that slide in the quilt or in the presentation, and I can show you in some more detail what McTavishing is. How long do you have access to the course? Forever, ever. So this is the way that I'm planning on doing it, is that when you sign up, you get access to that course forever. If you would like to go through as a community member in the next cohort, you either didn't finish, you loved it so much you want to do it again. I am trying to figure out how that is going to work for like subsequent cohorts if you want to come back as an alumni. But I'm not sure how that works, but you will have access to the version you buy forever. Until I die. How about that? Since I am not immortal. But yeah, once you have access, you have access. How big are the free quilt patterns? So there is one pattern, it is called Homework. And that is designed specifically for this class. It is 64 by 64. And that is intentional because once you learn a motif, you've doodled it, you've practiced it. I want you to take it and put it into at least a throw size quilt and practice cramming whatever you have to into the throat space of your sewing machine and putting that motif in an actual real life quilt that you can cuddle under, right? So Homework is 64 by 64. Your final projects, and I have a sample of one of the final projects right here that I will show you. One option is a 36 by 36. It's a wall hanging. It's great for scraps, and it was designed such that it lends itself to semi-custom quilting. So let me show you Midnight in the Garden, and I will try to, okay, so here we go, and then here we go, right? I'm going to see how far back I need to be for you to get the whole, there we go. This is Midnight in the Garden. It is 36 by 36. It's 4 different flowers on stems with leaves in a background. So let me see if I can show you some detail of how I did this. So pebbles for the background. I did paisleys in this flower. I did switchbacks in this stem with swirls in the leaves. I did ribbon candy in this stem, again with swirls. This blue flower is continuous curves. I have some more switchbacks in the orange. And I have regular swirls in the teal. So this pattern, 36 by 36, and it is set up beautifully for semi-custom quilting, and that can be an option for your final project. I also have something that's more of a fat quarter size, more of that 18 by 22, that you can mark with your hair marker and put different quilting motifs in different eras. So really big, wall hanging, really small. Those are your 3 options. How often are we meeting? We will do a live Q&A every single Thursday starting at 8 p.m. Eastern. I wish I could offer more times than just the 8 p.m. Eastern. I do still have a day job, so I have to get all of my work for my big boss done before I can come and play and hang out with you all. So every Thursday, 8 p.m. And then 2 Saturdays during the course when we have our practice weeks where no new motifs launched that week, we will get together from 9 a.m. to noon Eastern on Saturday morning for a sit and sew session. And every single session will be recorded and uploaded into the course website. So that way, if you do have to miss it, you can get there. How do I know my machine will be able to be used for quilting? This is from B. So B, at the beginning of our 3 things, I talked about what your sewing machine needed to do. You needed to be either to lower or cover your feed dogs. So most modern machines, you can, especially if they're made for a quilter, you can lower the feed dogs. If you can't lower them, all manufacturers will make like a little plastic plate that you can press into place over them so that they're covered and they're not dragging on your fabric. And then you need a quilting foot. And you can get those on Amazon. You can get them from your local quilt store. They don't have to be the name brand of your machine most often. You can get aftermarket parts for those. But those are the 2 things. If your machine can lower or cover the feed dogs, and if you have a quilting foot, you are ready for free motion quilting. Where do you begin the free motion quilting? Center, top. So when I was pin basting and things could still shift a lot, I always started in the center and I worked my way out. That way I could kind of press as I went and made sure that everything was staying flat. And then I discovered the joy that is spray basting, and I have never gone back. And I love it for several reasons. One, I hate pins, and my thumb was like a nasty bloody stomp when I was done trying to put all of the pins in, especially on my bigger 80 by 80 quilts, right? So the spray basting, you can start wherever you want. And once I realized that, I would start in the top left corner and I just kind of work my way down. One of the things about being able to start on the edge is that you can have your thread tails be off the end of your quilt, and that's a thread you don't have to bury at the end. Okay. Have you done any quilting with rulers? So I actually have like half a dozen quilting rulers. Again, I'm a sucker for specialty rulers, and my machine gave me fits the first time that I used it. And I did some research, and it turned out that I needed to have my tension all the way down almost. So that way, the ruler, there's a special foot for quilting with rulers that keep your ruler from going up and underneath the needle. And that foot required the tension to be turned almost all the way down. And then by the time that I got there to where it was actually like working and all of that, I really wasn't impressed. With the rulers, I have seen amazing work. With rulers, I think that maybe they're better for a long armor than somebody who's sewing on a domestic machine. And like I said at the top, I have never ever sewn on a long arm. I've never learned. I don't know anything about it. So I might play with rulers again if I ever get a long arm, but right now that's just not where I am in my journey. So I don't really play with them too much, but I do have a whole box over there. Her name is Karen McTavish. Thank you for, I don't know why I thought it was Susan. Thank you, Jan. Marilyn, this is a new course and knowing Joni for several years. Okay, full disclosure, Marilyn is a bestie. Oh, that'll be wonderful, organized, enthusiastic. Oh, thank you, Marilyn. Okay, I promise you that was not planned, and I'm about to die right now because I started reading before I realized what it was. How much time do you anticipate will be required each week? How much time do you think you can steal from your husband and your kids? Seriously. Like, I'm not saying that you need that much time because, like, I don't know, maybe an hour, right? Depends on how much you want to practice. But if you can tell your husband and your kids that you need 5, 6, 20, I'm not going to tell. Are you? No. So, you know, I think you should come to the, the weekly Q&A or watch those. So that's going to be about an hour, right? I think that, just as far as like what I'm seeing in the process of filming and editing all of the different motif videos, the first one is 15 minutes. But that's because I felt like I had a lot to say and introduce when we first sat down at the sewing machine for the first time. But the rest of them are coming out at about 5 to 8 minutes each, depending on how talky, how chatty I get. And then, you know, a little bit of practice time. So I don't know. I would say, honestly, if you have 4 hours a week to sew, that this class is probably a good fit to stay on schedule. I'd like to say there's no such thing as behind because we are all here on our own journeys. You have access to the class forever. Everything is taped and uploaded, even our lives. So, you know, 4 hours is great if you'd like to stay on track with the community and have that relationship with your fellow quilters as you're going through. If you don't have that time, fine. If you want to tell your husband that you need 20 hours a week, I am not going to say anything different. Okay. So we'll be going through each of those patterns in detail on video. Will there be an email? Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. Every single time that we release a module, you're going to get an email saying, yo, module dropped, right? And then each motif for that module has a video. And the first half of the video, we sit down and we are coloring. And every page in the workbook has an example of what the motif is, what it's good for. So like pebbles is really good for adding texture. It's really good for background quilting. And then what to watch out for, like, right? Like you want to make sure that you're trying to keep your pebbles close together. You want different sizes. Do you want them to be big? Do you want them to be small? So every single motif that you learn has an example, what it's good for, tips and tricks to watch out for, and then plenty of space for you to draw on your own. I don't know how it works, but there's something about the brain, even though you're moving your pen and not the paper, doodling works. Huge fan. And then the second half of the video is me at the sewing machine showing you how I do it. And then after that, get your practice sandwich out and get to practicing. Where there be an email or something? Yes, we'll do the email. Yeah, so if you're midweek and you get stuck on something, you just send a message to hello@fortheloveofthread, and we will make sure that we get you an answer as soon as possible. There's also a discussion section in each motif's lesson. So if you have a question, you can answer it there. I will check those every day and make sure that I get answers in, but you can also help each other out, right? I'm not the only expert in this room. I expect that there's going to be some folks who have done swirls before who can come out and help their colleagues. Okay, thank you. Okay. What adhesive do you use? We are in the room where it happens. I use Spray and Bond basting adhesive. I know that there is also like a 505 spray. I can't remember who the manufacturer of the 505 is, but you want something that is for fabric that will wash out when you put it in the wash. You don't want something that's super permanent. And that's what I use. It's just a Spray and Bond for it, and it'll say for quilting. Okay, it's an investment. It's time to invest in yourselves. Janine, absolutely. Like, here's the thing. The course is $197, and I went and I priced it out on Missouri Star's website today, and sending a 64 by 64, which is the size of the quilt that we are going to be working on together during our time together, was $140 plus shipping. I have to get it to them, right? So the projects that we do that you're going to come out of with 2 finished projects that you quilted, yay. The very next quilt that you do on your own, instead of sending out to somebody else, you have paid for the course. So it's not just an investment in you and your time and your learning, it's an investment in your future savings of not having to send every single quilt out, right? Because you can do it yourself. Okay, what's included in the 197 versus what's included in the kit? Okay, so the class is 197, and like I said, it's the 30 motifs, it's the live Q&As, the exclusive bonuses with the quilt patterns, the guide to backing, guide to quilting plans, project tracking sheet, the 2 Saturday morning sit and sews. That's all included in the class. The separate supply kit. So every time you watch a module on a motif, you're going to see the video, you're going to doodle it, and then you're going to take it to the machine. And you are going to do a practice sandwich. Yeah. They're somewhere around here. So if they decide to float to the top while we were doing this, I will try to show one up. So what is in this supply kit is 10 yards of muslin, which will make 20 practice sandwiches and enough batting to go into there. I'm also giving you a Hera marker, a pack of needles, a printed copy of the course workbook, and a large spool of Aurifil 50 weight thread. So the class is 197. It includes the instruction, the supply kit. If you would like for me to curate that for you and you're not interested in trying to go and find the supplies, or you just don't have it in your stash or whatever, that's the 147. And I ship that to you as soon as you order it. Okay, please resend the class link as you lost it. Yep. So Hubs just put that back in there. If you don't see it now, please let me know. Okay, Marianne, when I use spray adhesive, I get those plastic flannel back tablecloths from Walmart to put down as drop cloth. They're really inexpensive. That's really smart. You know what else I like about the flannel backed tablecloths is that if you don't have space for a design room or a design wall, lay it out, flannel side up, put all your blocks down. And if you you have to clean up after yourself because you can't have stuff in the living room, like your family won't let you, right? Because it's slippery on one side and it's flannel on the other side. When you go to roll it up and then you unroll it, that sticky, it's not going to stick to that slippery side, right? So you can unroll it and everything is right there and good to go. So if your family is mean and makes you pick up after yourself, that's a great way to keep things organized as a portable design wall too. But yeah, I like the drop cloth. Usually I use Warm and Natural. And so it's got like that paper wrapping in there. And I usually keep that and I'll put it out as a barrier around it. So that way the paper catches any of the overspray instead of my wood floors. Okay. All right. So let's put the link to the class and the supply kit in one last time. Yes. So tomorrow I will make sure that you have the link. So if you're not seeing it tonight, or if you're not ready tonight, absolutely. When I send the replay and a small gift to you tomorrow, I will make sure that link is in there. I am not seeing any other questions. Oh, one more, Glenda. Is it possible to pay for a printed course guide only? I already have the supplies needed. Yeah, why not? We can do that. I need to add it to the shop, so I don't have a link to share with you. But if there's interest in that, absolutely, I can do that for you. Okay. All right. I am not seeing any other questions come in. I am so grateful for every single one of you. I don't know where we're at right now. I don't know what our number was when we started or where we were at our peak, but right now there are 60 of you who chose to come in here and spend some time with me tonight. And I am so grateful for that. I am completely aware that there are probably a ton of other things that you could have done tonight. And instead you chose to spend your time with me. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I am so grateful you're all here. If there's anything else I can do for you, hello@fortheloveofthread.com. If you have an email from me, hit reply and that will come to the same address. And I will do everything I can to get you an answer as soon as I can. Do have to work the day job tomorrow. So if it's, you know, probably going to be on my lunch rather than, you know, and as soon as humanly possible. But thank you, thank you, thank you, everybody, for being here. I've seen some very good friends in here supporting me. I've made some new friends tonight. I'm so excited that if nothing else, please walk away knowing you can do this. I believe in you. Everybody else on this line believes in you. And thank you so much. Have a great night. Bye for now.